Hey guys, it's Chris. From the biggest failed hostage rescue attempt in human history to the truth behind how deadly that Thai cave rescue could have been, here are 10 times when rescue missions went horribly wrong. Number 10. The Thai Cave Rescue. Do you remember the rescue of the Thai football team that got trapped in a flooded cave back in 2018? It was international news and one of the biggest rescue attempts of the last decade. And while the team of 12 boys and their coach were eventually freed, they almost weren't. This situation could have resulted in all of the people trapped inside the cave dying due to some water pumps. This situation could have resulted in all the people trapped inside the cave dying due to some water pumps. According to an account given by 3 Australian divers who were involved in the rescue mission, the water pumps that they had been using to keep the water levels low enough to rescue the boys actually stopped working just before the mission was complete. These Australian divers claimed that rescue workers were still inside the cave when the pumps broke and the water levels began to rise. What a lot of people didn't see in the news after the boys were rescued was the near-death situation when these water pumps broke. At least 100 workers were still inside the caves, and those outside could hear screaming and yelling as the workers scrambled to make it out, the water rising behind them and threatening to engulf them all. But luckily, everyone made it out, and to this day, the Thai Cave Rescue is one of the most prolific rescue missions ever. But it almost wasn't. Had those water pumps broken just a few hours earlier, everyone would probably have been killed. Number 9. Lazy Volcano Rescue. The White Island volcano disaster in New Zealand was one of the most recent volcanic tragedies in living memory. 21 people died from the sudden eruption while on vacation back in 2019, including citizens from several different countries. This all went down when the volcano on the island went off with 47 people inside of the blast zone. It was considered to be a erratic eruption, meaning that the volcano released steam and volcanic gases, causing an eruption of rock and smoking hot ash. But here's where the failed rescue attempt comes in. Survivors recently told 60 Minutes that they felt like they'd been left for dead on the island as emergency crews refused to get close to the volcano because of the possible danger that it posed to the rescue workers. Almost a year after the incident, one of the medical directors who had been involved in the rescue said that they probably could have flown to the island earlier, meaning they could have reached the injured people sooner and possibly saved more lives. Many professionals are now saying that less people would have died if the rescue workers had just arrived on the island within a reasonable time. Instead, crews sat by and waited at the Wakatane airfield while people suffered from horrifying burns, crippling injuries, and inhalation of toxic gases. By the time they finally landed on the island, 21 people were dead and 25 people were horribly injured. Number 8. The Botched Helicopter Rescue. A 74-year-old woman recently became the star of her very own horror movie. It happened when the older woman had been hiking in the Piestewa Peak in Arizona, the second highest peak in the Phoenix Mountains. She apparently suffered a head injury and needed to be airlifted out. Considering the rocky terrain where the woman sustained her injury, the only way to rescue her was with a helicopter. But this is where everything went horribly wrong. The helicopter rescue was completely botched. The woman ended up spinning around at extremely high speeds while strapped to a stretcher that was being winched up into the helicopter. What's even more insane is that this entire thing was captured on video and reported on by basically every local news station in the United States. The aircraft crew was really trying to winch the woman up from the stretcher and into the safety of the helicopter, but she just kept spinning around like a yo-yo out of control. In fact, she was going so fast that she was hard to see, spinning like a blur like the Tasmanian devil. The helicopter ended up being forced to fly away with the woman spinning on the end of the line, dangling above the peaks of the mountain. Luckily, the spinning did eventually stop. The woman was able to get onto the helicopter, and other than being a lot dizzy, she was totally fine. But can I just say, a 74-year-old woman probably shouldn't go hiking up that high all alone. Hey, real quick, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Give this video a like and hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this one. Number 7. The Killer Mountain. One mountain climber was saved and one was left behind during an extremely dramatic rescue mission on Nanga Parbat. Nanga Parbat is one of the tallest mountains in the world and sometimes considered to be even more dangerous than its nearby friend, Mount Everest. A French mountaineer named Elizabeth Revel recently had to be saved by a team of volunteer rescuers who themselves had to be pulled from K2 and transported by helicopter to rescue Elizabeth after she and her climbing partner got into a bit of trouble. A storm had moved in, making it impossible for Elizabeth and her partner Thomas to go on. According to the report from NPR, the rescue team was unable to make it deeper through the storm to the crevasse where Elizabeth's partner was believed to be holding up and taking shelter from the brutal winds. The rescue mission did manage to reach Elizabeth in time to save her from frostbite and death, but her climbing partner was not so lucky. He had already been struck down by frostbite and snow blindness, and the rescue team insisted that they leave him behind because there simply wasn't anything they could do. As of now, Tomas has been declared dead. You know, sometimes just not everyone gets rescued. Number 6. The bill for the failed rescue. The families of 2 British tourists who've been killed by a sudden avalanche while snowboarding in the French Alps have recently been harassed and chased by debt collectors. A massive bill of over $20,000 was charged to the families for the failed rescue attempts of Sam Harbour and James Rourke. This is something that nobody should ever have to deal with. These 2 young boys died while snowboarding in France, and even with the help of a French mountain rescue team, a skilled helicopter pilot, and a team of dogs, the boys could not be saved. They were swept up by a huge torrent of ice and snow on Grand Mont, and that was the end of them. It wasn't until a day later that Rourke's body was found, but it would be 2 months before the other young man's corpse was discovered. Coincidentally, his corpse was found on what would have been his 26th birthday. And as if losing these vibrant young souls weren't enough, their families have been hounded by debt collectors from the French rescue company, as they're now expected to pay over $10,000 each to cover the rescue costs, even though the boys didn't end up being rescued. That's just garbage, and it's obviously caused a huge controversy, as this is a horrible thing to do to a grieving family. But what you might find interesting is that under French law, any surviving relative becomes liable to pay for the rescue bill of the deceased person, whereas in places like Britain, where the men came from, that kind of thing would never happen. Number 5. The Everest bodies. When it comes to failed rescue attempts, there's no place on Earth more notorious than Mount Everest in Nepal. Professional estimates place the number of forgotten bodies on the mountain at over 200, with at least 300 deaths on the mountain since it was first climbed back in 1953. But what a lot of people don't understand about Everest is that rescue attempts are basically impossible. When a person dies high near the summit of Everest, they usually just stay there. In 2019 alone, at least 11 people died on the mountain according to ABC News. And even after a recent expedition by the government of Nepal to bring down the bodies of the deceased, only 4 dead bodies were able to be taken down from the top of the mountain. The rest of the bodies are still up there, and probably will be for the next 1,000 years. It's not an easy task climbing Everest, and it's even harder for rescuers to locate the frozen bodies that didn't make it. Number 4. Death under the sea. A doctor who recently became qualified for diving was discovered dead 80 feet below the surface of the water after a complete lack of action from her diving instructor. So far as the story goes, Olivia Byram, who'd only been 29 years old at the time, embarked on her 3rd and last training dive when she was seen by witnesses sinking to the bottom of a popular lagoon in Tulum, Mexico. Here's where the failed rescue comes in. Her diving instructor didn't even jump into the water to save her. This useless human instead asked someone to get her mobile phone out of her car so she could call for help. As a diving instructor, it was her duty to get into the water and save Olivia's life, and yet she did nothing. The coroner even concluded that Olivia's death was caused in part by inadequate safety processes. This was a sad and unnecessary end to Olivia's life, as she had just finished her 6-year medical degree at the Bristol University. There's been no word on what happened to that negligent instructor, but we can only hope that she probably lost her job and will be facing serious consequences. Number 3. No hostages left. A mission to save 52 American hostages being held in Iran in the year 1980 ended in absolute disaster, making it one of the biggest rescue missions gone wrong in history. The crisis began on November 4th of 1979, when the United States Embassy in Tehran was seized. The exact circumstances are way too complicated for even a 20-minute video, but the basics are that Iran's political and religious leader of the time allowed the release of all non-US citizens and females and minorities, and then kept the remaining 52 captives for 14 long months. The president of the time was Jimmy Carter, and he was unable to solve the crisis diplomatically. So as a last-ditch effort to save the 52 people, President Carter ordered a military operation to get them out, which was unfortunately a massive failure. 3 out of the 8 helicopters failed. The airborne plans didn't work, and before the military even intervened, the mission was canceled on the staging platform in Iran. However, when one of the helicopters retreated, it crashed into a transport plane and killed 8 service members and injured 5 people. In the end, the hostages were eventually released, but not for another 270 days. It became a huge nightmare for President Carter and an absolute mess of a rescue. Luckily, the 52 captives did make it out alive, but not after a complete 444 dreadful days as hostages. Number 2. Death after the rescue. This story of a hiker rescued from a California mountain trail is remarkable for one reason. Normally, a missing hiker will either die before being rescued or during a botched rescue attempt. But in this case, the hiker actually died after she was found and rescued. So here's how that happened. Cassandra Bravo from Riverside, California spent 2 days lost somewhere off the Mount Whitney Trail before she was eventually recovered by rescue teams. She was in rough shape, cold, starving, and extremely weak. And even though the rescue went off without a hitch and she was transported to the Antelope Valley Hospital, she died soon after. However, New York Daily News did not divulge the exact details of her cause of death. What we know is that since her unfortunate demise, a GoFundMe page has raised at least $40,000 to support the 2 children she's left behind, all because she wanted to do a bit of hiking. People, please do not hike alone. Number 1. The dead hostage. After a botched rescue attempt by the United States, an American journalist named Luke Summers and South African Pierre Corky being held with him were killed by militants from Al-Qaeda operating in Yemen. You might remember this story from 2014. It all began when Luke, who worked as a copy editor and freelance photographer for the National Yemen, was kidnapped after leaving a supermarket in the country's capital city back in 2013. He was captured, held prisoner, and very likely tortured. To get Luke back, the United States decided to take some serious action. The exact same unit that had successfully raided Osama bin Laden was sent in to get Luke Summers out of there. This is the SEAL Team 6 unit, supposedly the best in the world. Unfortunately, they didn't complete the rescue and Luke was killed. When SEAL Team 6 set out to rescue Luke, they brought everything. They were supported by helicopters, aircrafts, and surveillance drones. They knew where Luke was being kept, and so they swooped in with every intention of saving his life. However, according to NPR's Pentagon correspondent, there was too much noise being made. The terrorists living inside the compound were alerted of the team's incursion into their territory, and they wrangled up their hostages. They shot both Luke Summers and Pierre Corky from South Africa. Even though both hostages were retrieved by the team, they were later declared dead after being taken to a United States Navy ship in the region. Thanks for watching. Have you ever needed to be rescued? If so, let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more amazing videos.